Let's go ahead and get started. I want to give our panelists an opportunity to, tell a little bit about their background and the lens that they are seeing innovative housing solutions from. So, Brandon, I'll start with you. I'm not from Indianapolis, and I know LISC is a national organization, but can you, for those who may not be familiar with it, can you just kind of give us a high-level overview of your background, your role, the lens that you see innovative housing solutions from, and then tell us a little bit about what LISC does as an organization.
Of course. Thank you so much, Deja, for that introduction, and it's good to be with you all. Good morning. Again, my name is Brandon Taylor, and I currently serve as the Deputy Director for our LISC Indianapolis office. For those who are not familiar with LISC, LISC is a nationwide community development financial institution. So we've been in this space for about 40 years, primarily investing in affordable housing from our very beginning. And those financing products have expanded out into commercial real estate, retail, grocery stores, office facilities, you name it really, in terms of the types of developments that we can support today. But then we also have a significant amount of funding dollars invested in community and economic development work. So across housing, small business entrepreneurship, workforce development, creative placemaking, safety and justice, healthy food, and other critical capacity building resources for our communities that we're serving across the country. Indianapolis is one of our 38 offices, so we also have offices really throughout the country in major metropolitan areas. But then also LISC has a deep network of rural counties that we're also supporting, about 2,600 counties across the country that we also support from our LISC rural team. Here in Indianapolis, I oversee our program strategy work, which includes our economic and workforce development investments, our place-based community development work, which would also include affordable housing, and then, of course, our lending and community investments here in Indianapolis, which is all of our lending products and also our CDFI collaborative work, which allows us to work very closely with folks like Stephanie from Intend Indiana. And then lastly, I oversee our operations. So that's pretty much the began of it. I've been in Indianapolis for the last, I'd say, 2.5 years. This was more of a homecoming for me. I was born and raised in the region, as they call it, up in Northwest Indiana, and but spent a lot of my early career out in New York and Pennsylvania before coming back to my home state of Indiana. So good to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you back here with us in Indiana, good old Hoosier State. Stephanie, we'll bounce to you. If you could just bring us into a little bit of the work that Indy does, and just like your role and like your perspective on this topic.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me this morning, Deja. It's great to be here. I'm Stephanie Quick. I'm president here at Intend Indiana. Here at Intend, we have 4 main initiatives. Those initiatives include, as Brandon mentioned, we are a CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution. And what that means is that we have some leeway in regards to how we are able to provide funding to underserved communities. We are like a bank, but not a bank. In regards to that, we really provide those opportunities to businesses and individuals who would not traditionally be able to walk into a bank and receive funding. So starting with Built Fund, that's our small business lending arm. And again, we provide that capital to those small businesses who are trying to grow their business and create jobs, but just may not be quite ready to walk into a more traditional bank. So we help them get started and help them get what we call bankable. Our next initiative is known as Edge Fund. With Edge Fund, we provide affordable housing lending. So that includes mortgage financing. We also do some multifamily bridge financing, and that gives us an opportunity to work with folks like Joe at Englewood to provide some of the funding that they may need in order to get to the finish line on funding sources for some of their multifamily and supportive housing developments. We also have a housing development arm, which is known as Affordable Home Matters. With Affordable Home Matters, we do rehabs of existing homes and construct new homes for the purpose of home ownership for low-income home buyers. We do that primarily with partners, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. But that's our affordable housing arm. And last but not least is our Renew Land Bank initiative. And with the Renew Land Bank, we provide technical assistance and some management expertise to land banks around the state of Indiana, helping those cities and towns who may have a land bank that they're trying to grow or start, and just providing some of that guidance in regards to how to do that, how to understand some of the legislation surrounding land banks, and just helping them to move forward. So we started in Indianapolis as a very traditional CDC over 35 years ago. And we've grown from there to being very specifically neighborhood based to covering all of Indianapolis. And then in 2022, we expanded and we now serve all of Indiana.
Wow.
I've been with the organization since 2019. Came in as the director of real estate development, so really oversaw the housing development and land banking piece of the organization. I've been in some level of economic development or community development for over 20 years now, and just really excited to be able to continue to move initiatives forward surrounding community development.
Oh, thank you for sharing. Sounds like your org plays a huge role in, not only mitigating some of these issues, but also setting us up to be proactive about these issues in the future as well, which is a huge footprint. So thank you for sharing. Joe, we'll round it out with you. I know you're in the community a lot, so your face may be not familiar for a lot of people on this call, but if you could just again give us a little bit of background on Englewood CDC and your role and the lens that you see this topic through as well.
Yeah, thank you, Deja. Well, it's really fun to kind of be on a panel with Stephanie and Brandon. Both these guys are folks that I just really love and respect, and couldn't think of better kind of panelists to chat with a little bit. And do know a lot of the folks on the call. It's just kind of fun to see a lot of colleagues here and folks that have kind of invested in me too. Englewood CDC was birthed in 1996 out of Englewood Christian Church, which has been on the Near East Side of Indianapolis since 1895. I got involved with the organization right after college in 1998 and joined the board and kind of became a kind of volunteer staff person for many, many years until I joined in my current role in 2012. We are on the Near East Side, and so we really kind of consider ourselves practitioners of both asset-based and comprehensive community development across the Near East Side. And so I don't think that means we have to do everything. I think that just means we have to care about everything and make sure that we see the connections between things like employment and housing and how those impact our neighbors, particularly our neighbors who are the most vulnerable and maybe are the most likely to be left behind or left out. So we do a lot of different things. We certainly do a lot of affordable housing, but also economic development, big projects that we've done like the PR Mallory campus to kind of birth two neighborhood-based schools with our friends at the Bonner Center and a lot of other projects. On the affordable housing side, though, we've really developed a bit of a specialty over the last 10 or so years in doing affordable rental housing developments that really serve some of our most vulnerable neighbors. And a good percentage of those are folks that have come out of homelessness, which is kind of permanent supportive housing, but then some other strategies with partners like Exodus and Noble serving persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So again, just kind of looking at vulnerable populations and maybe how they're not being served and how we can kind of help in that. But glad to be with you guys today.
Yeah, likewise. And thank you for sharing, Joe. I'm going to go ahead and dive into our next question. I heard you mention neighbors a lot and just what it means to be a good neighbor in the community that you're facing. So can you share just some of the unique challenges faced by neighborhoods like Englewood and surrounding neighborhoods, and how your organization is working to create innovative housing solutions that are tailored specifically to those needs?
I certainly can, and I don't think that these kind of challenges that I'll mention are particularly unique to Englewood. I would imagine that many of the folks on the call are experiencing these things too. I think the number one kind of factor right now, or challenge right now, is just the percent and the extent of the folks that are housing cost burdened and paying. It's just like we sometimes think of housing cost burden as folks that are paying more than 30% of their income on housing. With the 360 or so housing units that we kind of own and manage right now, I think a lot of the folks that are coming to us are paying way more than 30%, and many are paying, well, again, just a majority are paying way more than 50%, and some are paying 75% or more of their paycheck just to kind of maintain their housing. And so I think that number has just continued to rise and higher and higher. And so I think that's the number one challenge that I think we're trying to grapple with. And the second is just the high price of property. So for affordable housing developers like us, it's harder and harder. I mean, I remember the days when if there was a property that we wanted to develop and it was vacant, I mean, it would mostly just be given to us, or we'd have to kind of pay a token amount to control that property. And now just sort of burned out shells of houses are selling for $200,000. And so it's not affordable really in just the acquisition. And so you need a subsidy almost from jump, just to kind of get the acquisition price down, not to mention the price to develop the home. So it has certainly sharpened our skills in terms of being more creative and trying to layer additional funding sources in order to produce even one unit of affordable housing. We've tried to overcome some of those challenges by certainly looking for ways to do affordable housing on smaller parcels of land, and sometimes that means if we're doing some home ownership stuff, that we're kind of doing that with a townhome sort of development that uses land a little bit more efficiently, or duplexes or multi-story buildings, considering things like co-ops and condominium regimes, etc., just to kind of use land more effectively and reduce the overall cost there. I mean, we're certainly also kind of playing around with other strategies in terms of how buildings get built, and if we can build them in a shorter amount of time and reduce the total development cost there. And so we will next week set 7 3-story townhomes on a site at East New York Street and Temple Avenue, just a couple blocks west of Rural, with our friends at Volumod. We've done 4 units with Volumod already as kind of duplex townhomes. These will be kind of a first of its kind 3-story townhomes, just kind of set on that corner. So that's one where we're kind of blending sort of a unique way of building houses, as well as kind of a more land efficient way of kind of setting those on a parcel too. But again, I think for us, the preponderance of the work that we've done recently has really been in affordable rental housing and trying to find ways to serve more and more vulnerable neighbors.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned, it impacts just more than just the communities that we're serving, more than just Englewood or Martindale, Brightwood. Whether you're looking to buy a house or you own a house or you're trying to flip a house, it impacts us on every level. So thank you for sharing. And Stephanie, transitioning to you, I heard you mention a little bit about like the beginning of Intend Indy and how it started off like just neighborhood based. It has that foundation. I would love to hear from you just what role does community input play in Intend Indiana's approach to developing housing initiatives, and how do you ensure these initiatives reflect those community priorities?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good question, Deja. So as I mentioned, we started out as a very traditional CDC, which of course are normally have neighborhood boundaries or specific geographic boundaries. So as we've grown and we've moved away from being that face of the neighborhood, I'll call it, it has been very important to us that we do stay in touch with the communities that we're working in. And when I say stay in touch, I mean, even though we are not the face of the community, very intentionally creating partnerships within the community with those grassroots organizations, with those community development corporations and other community partners, so that we are able to walk side by side along with them to both get in front of the community so that we are hearing that feedback alongside them, and also hearing straight from our community partners just in regards to the needs of the community and how we can collaborate to work with one another to get to the point of whatever their goals and whatever their mission is related to housing development.
Absolutely. And I feel like another part of, partnership that we don't really highlight as much when we use that word is advocacy, and how that plays a role, especially in the nonprofit world. So, Brandon, transitioning to you here, would love to hear from you just what policy recommendations does LISC advocate for to support innovative housing solutions, and how can community members get involved in this advocacy?
Thank you for that, Deja. And yes, LISC has a longstanding national policy effort at our national level. So we have a well-staffed team that really tracks, developments across, the federal government and, across the different states that LISC is active in, to help us understand how these, policy efforts are affecting our communities that we're serving. So at a super high, like at that national level, I can talk about, some of the, local housing priorities that we're advancing, but then also I'll get to what we're doing here locally as well to begin to build out some of that muscle around policy. So LISC is a huge advocate for enhancing and expanding the affordable housing tax credit. So we have a LISC affiliate, the National Equity Fund, that is one of the largest nonprofit syndicators of low-income housing tax credits on housing development. So that's one of our priorities, and we want to continue to see more resources brought to the housing tax credit. Also, expanding Section 8, housing choice voucher program. That's a big one for us. Increasing the HUD homeless assistance programs as well. I think we've all talked about or he's heard about the challenges that veterans are facing as well when it comes to housing. And so LISC continues to push forward policies around increasing the resources and the different innovations that are happening in the support of housing for veterans. So that's another really high level one that we're advancing. I'd say down payment assistance is probably the last one I'll mention, and continue to see more resources for housing counseling initiatives here locally in our local LISC Indianapolis office. Not only are we tracking the different policy efforts that are happening pertinent to those kind of housing priorities at our national level, but we're also looking to build out our own policy agenda. We actually just earlier this year promoted a team member into a policy and engagement role in our team, which is the first time in my understanding of our local office that we've had a role that's been dedicated to focusing on policy. And so that person has been entrusted to help us build out that policy agenda, figuring out what are the policy priorities that of our community partners, and we're actually preparing to enter a period of really socializing those priorities with our fellow residents and partners in the coming month or so. So I hope to share more information about that. And we do have a general framework, like a skeleton built out right now, but we're looking forward to really putting some more definition around those priorities. And in the future, I see us having a community or resident like advisory council or some group that's coming together regularly in our neighborhoods to ensure that all of these priorities are really being fed by the challenges and by the opportunities that our neighbors are lifting up.
Well, amazing work on the horizon. I'm looking forward to hearing or reading about or whatever it may be, what's to come next with that. So thank you for sharing. Now that we've kind of covered the basis of everything, I want to kind of shift our attention to be forward thinking, solution oriented. So looking ahead, and Stephanie, I'll begin with you. What is your vision just for the future of housing in Indiana? Like, I know that's kind of a broad question. So like, what innovative trends or technologies or, techniques and whatnot do you believe will be crucial in just reshaping housing development to foster, vibrant and resilient neighborhoods throughout central Indiana?
Yeah, so in that regard, as we here at Intent, as we think about especially affordable housing and affordable homeownership, particularly the things that we focus on, it's not only the developing the houses, doing the infill development and the rehab of homes, but it's also really making the home truly affordable. So I think everyone on the panel can speak to the subsidies that we apply for, either at the local, federal, or even philanthropic levels to assist with both the construction or the rehab of the homes. But it will also be very critical to make the mortgage affordable as well in the case of home ownership. And then we do that by combining our initiatives together. So I mentioned our 4 initiatives, but particularly related to home ownership and the things that I believe are on the horizon and that we should broadly take pay more attention to it and really try to collaborate even better on is not only again building the houses, but also again as a CDFI providing that funding for some of those smaller general contractors to have that capacity and that funding to be able to successfully bid on some of the housing opportunities. What we've seen is that a number of smaller contractors do not bid on housing developments because one, they don't have the means to more or less float the payments or float the cost until they're able to receive their first payment from a draw. So we're able to provide some of those opportunities to give them some of that funding up front and be successful in bidding, which oftentimes means that the cost to build that particular home or rehab that home is lower. Then the other piece to that, sort of that next step, as I mentioned, is that subsidy to go towards that, making the home, the actual price of the home, a little bit more affordable for that low-income home buyer. And last but certainly not least is that affordable mortgage product. We can sell a home for, a brand new home for $150,000 with some subsidy, but especially with today's interest rates, with a traditional mortgage, that can still be very much out of reach for a low-income home buyer. Joe talked about being housing cost burden. Those are some of the things that we pay particular attention to. As Joe mentioned, folks are the traditional threshold is that 30% of the income, but we've seen, of course, where folks, as Joe mentioned, are paying 45%, 70%, which is absolutely ridiculous, of their income towards rent. Even though homeownership is not for everyone, using both our housing development efforts and subsidies, as well as providing affordable mortgage products through our Edge Fund initiative, we're able to truly make the month-to-month cost of housing much more affordable. So just thinking about the horizon and things that are to come, not only in regards to how we're building the homes and making them more efficient through things like energy efficiency, solar panels, things of that nature, bringing the utility costs down for especially for those low-income home buyers, but truly making the home, the overall month-to-month expenses more affordable.
Oh, thank you. And Joe and Brandon, I want to open up the floor if you want to piggyback on anything that Stephanie said or highlighted before we move on to the next question. Please feel free. Good.
Well, maybe I'll just kind of say, I appreciated DJ. I appreciated your kind of intro, and I do think you kind of described the 3 of us as visionaries, and I think I've learned over the years that that we all have a certain amount of vision that we bring to this work. But if it's Joe Bowling's vision, or even if it's Stephanie or Brandon's vision, it's not likely to succeed unless it's other people's vision too, or you've combined your vision with others so you can kind of see a bunch of different angles. And so I do think just kind of putting ourselves in position to listen in community, and to listen to those that are really the most burdened and saddled kind of by very, very difficult housing environment we have, I think that gives us our best chance to be successful. And that's not just sort of mock humility. I mean, or false humility. I really do believe that. So I think the more that we can do kind of community vision processes and develop housing strategies that come really out of collaboration with one another. It's just like anything that we do is going to be some version of collective impact or partnership, and that certainly includes, with Intend or with LISC, et cetera. So we need one another to kind of see our way here. But yeah, I mean, just as Stephanie was saying, and as I alluded to earlier, what do you do with so many folks that maybe just have $1,000 a month in income from Social Security? How do they make it? Like you can't hardly touch anything, even with a one bedroom, for less than $800. And so if they've got $1,000 in income, what do you do? And so those are the kind of things that we're trying to think about a little bit, and how do we get total development costs down? How do we get certainly mortgage amounts down or rental prices down, that they really are affordable for those that are just left with just impossible kind of situations.
Yeah.
Yeah, two things I wanted to touch on that Joe, if I can, Deja, jump in.
Yeah, absolutely, please.
Joe mentioned something really, really critical there, and I think that's one of the reasons why our work at LISC, we strive for it to be so comprehensive, and understanding that these are not issues in a vacuum, but they do require really a holistic approach to improving the quality of life of neighborhoods. So in regards to workforce development, I mean, those investments are critical, right, to really help folks be on a better path to economic mobility and be further away from from poverty, as United Way has charted out in your strategic plan. So I think that those investments, in helping folks, get access to the financial coaching and the job coaching and the other income supports that are necessary for their family at that point in time, so that they can be on a pathway to, more affordable, a more affordable home, or a home ownership, a pathway as well. The other uh, thing that Joe mentioned in the word was collaboration, and I think that as we at LISC, one of the benefits is being able to network and connect with so many different markets across the country who are also facing similar challenges, and launching what we view as really innovative approaches or solutions to these challenges specific to affordable housing. So I'll highlight a couple if I can here. Our Cleveland team has recently launched their Cleveland Housing Investment Fund, which is a public-private partnership amounting to the tune of about $100 million or so for the development of mixed income rental housing and home ownership there in Cleveland. There's banks at the table there. There's community partners at the table there. Of course, LISC is at the table and other stakeholders, but that's a really great demonstration of dollars coming around to support the development and really to offset the other capital, more expensive capital that's coming into the affordable housing development space. Detroit continues to be a shining example for us at LISC of what long-standing investment in affordable housing can accomplish. So they have their Detroit Housing for the Future Fund, which is another public-private partnership to bring low-interest loan capital for developers who are focused on affordable housing development there in Detroit. And they have just really blown the roof off of the initial goals that were set for that fund. And they're actually recapitalizing another fund to go back and to accomplish some of the same objectives. The last one that I'll highlight is in Philadelphia. I used to actually work in our LISC Philadelphia office, and one of the neat things I saw there was the development of the Philadelphia Preservation Network, which was another public-private collaborative of entities that came together to focus on preserving and protecting the existing affordable housing properties and rental properties in Philadelphia. So, they were advancing a host of different objectives and initiatives to help affordable housing remain affordable there in Philadelphia. So just to kind of talk about the creation of affordable housing, but then also the preservation components too.
And thank you for sharing, Brandon. That kind of leads me into my next question. We hear this word collaboration a lot, partnership, those kinds of things. So if we're thinking of, actionable advice that we can give to the listeners on the call, we think collaboration. So similar to what Brandon just did, the Cleveland office, the Detroit office, what resources or funding opportunities are available for nonprofits and community organizations that are looking to implement innovative housing solutions? How can our attendees on the call today or anyone who might watch the recording access these resources? Where should they go? Where should they be looking? How can they get started? Um, Stephanie, I'll begin with you, and then Joe, I'll give you an opportunity to share. And then Brandon, if you want to add any other ones that you're aware of, feel free, please. But Stephanie, if you want to kick us off with that.
Yes, and I'm really glad that Brandon mentioned all of the things really across the country that are currently happening. And I will just say that we as Intent, we of course we can't do the work that we do without partnerships, without collaborations, without community partners. Some of the resources, especially when we're talking about collaborations, some of those are definitely more impactful the more you collaborate, and anymore that's exactly what funders are looking for is those collaborations, the which leads to the larger impact. So we're not just talking about one or two houses. We're talking about bringing folks together who can make a larger impact and create more units, touch more folks in the community, be it providing them with education, be it providing across the partnerships, that peer-to-peer exchange, that sharing of experiences and knowledge, those lessons learned, so that we can be more impactful, enforceful, and make applications for these and proposals for these various funding opportunities. So just a few that we have access to, especially as being a CDFI or a nonprofit engaged in community development. I can think of a few just related to, of course, the CDFI fund, that requires some partnership with a CDFI. But as Brandon mentioned, there's a collaboration of CDFIs here in Indiana that provide a varying degree of funding opportunities. So collaborating with other CDFIs to help build that pipeline and make for a more impactful funding proposal. Also, in regards to align with that, I'll say it's another opportunity known as the capital magnet funding. And with that one, what we've seen over the years is that again, they want to see proposals where it's more than just one organization. It's making an impact throughout a region, throughout an entire city, throughout the state. And the more I'll say the more units, the more people that we can touch, the better. And then certainly even on a local level here in Indianapolis, especially thinking about philanthropic opportunities, we're seeing more and more there as well, that those funders, they want to see how we can impact either a certain priority of theirs, but how impactful can we be? Who can we bring to the table? Who can we share our knowledge with, and who can touch the community in a broader way? So those are just some of the things that we're seeing.
Beautiful. And then Joe, if you want to add in.
Yeah, Deja, this question kind of made me think a little bit more just about how much we have benefited from partnerships. I mean, first and foremost, I'll say that there's some folks from the Bonner Center on this call. And in 2011, when we had not done a multifamily development before, we asked our friends at the Bonner Center if they'd partner with us to really help build our capacity. They said yes, and that was a game changer for us. And so I think for us as kind of a Christ-centered organization where, the golden rule is do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. We've been the recipient of so many partnerships and folks that have invested in us that we need to do that with others. So I just listed our last 7 multifamily projects, and each one has at least one long-term partner: Horizon House, Outreach Inc., Noble of Indiana, Wheeler Mission Ministries, Purdue Polytechnic High School, Exodus Refugee, Living Word Baptist Church. Those are our last 7 projects, with a partnership that isn't just sort of like, will you write me a letter of support? Like, all 7 of those organizations have daily responsibilities in the care for very vulnerable folks that live in that housing. And as Stephanie was kind of saying, this is really an opportunity to say, hey, we can't do this. We're good at an aspect of what we do, but we don't have, you know, the expertise to serve refugee populations on a daily basis. We're separated by language, by culture, by so many things. These folks know how to do that. We know how to do what we know how to do. They know how to do what they know how to do. So I think in terms of serving folks better, partnerships are essential. But a lot of times these partnerships are also capacity building, either capacity building for us or capacity building for the other organization. So next Wednesday, we will cut the ribbon on a 36 unit building in a co-ownership and partnership with our friends at the Horizon House for 36 units of housing for folks that are coming directly out of homelessness, out of tents, under bridges, etc., into permanent housing. We're going to co-own the building together. We'll do what we do best, which is ownership and property management, and they'll do what they do best, which is delivering essential services to populations that are in kind of that position. And that's how this partnership will go for the next 30 or so years. So really, really excited about that, and partnerships are pretty essential.
Yeah, and I want to just highlight and uplift all of the partnership and great work that you all are doing in the community. A 36 unit build, like, that's amazing, and congratulations on that. Thank you for sharing. But the work and the impact that we have on the communities that we're serving when we collaborate and leverage our strengths with one another are pivotal, and they make such a pivotal difference as well. So highlighting and just emphasizing the importance of collaboration. Anyone on the call, if there's any resources that you need, any funding opportunities that you're interested in, please don't hesitate to reach out. If I don't have the answer or they don't have the answer, I'm sure we can get you to the person who does have the answer. And there are no such thing as bad questions. So it doesn't hurt to ask. The impact in the shifts that we're trying to make in these communities, it's worth it, I'd say. So I want to allow some space for Q&A. If you have any questions, please feel free to come off mute, place them in the chat box, use the Q&A function on Zoom. But I want to open up the floor to allow some space from to have questions from the audience. And it looks like actually we have one in the chat. LaDonna asked if you could share the names again, maybe in writing, that Englewood just shared that were their partners. Joe, if you...
I can jot that down and put it in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you, LaDonna.
I have a question.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Julie.
First of all, thank you, all 3 of you, for everything your organizations are doing. Joe, what a great tribute to the partnerships that Englewood has developed over time, and I know you're all doing that. It's wonderful. I guess my question is, given what you talked about at the beginning, the high housing cost burden, I don't think you guys even really touched on evictions, but obviously that goes along with it. Is there any hope in the short term of things getting better? I mean, building takes a long time, and we're marching, we're building, we're developing, we're working on policy change, and that's also kind of a long time horizon. Does anyone see anything getting better in the next year for families who are really struggling cost wise, and what's happening on that front?
Man, Julie, I mean, I'll say just really quickly, it's a shame on me for not mentioning evictions earlier. I kind of looked at some of these stats for an event here recently. 1 in 7 leases signed today in the city of Indianapolis will likely end with an eviction filing. 1 in 7, and that is across Indianapolis. That is not with our lowest income neighbors, where that percentage, I'm sure, is much higher. certainly the statewide stuff to advocate for better legislation for tenant protections, etc., is very, very important. But I think we all recognize just the challenges there. I do think that we have to. I think we have to value the work that property managers do and help them a little bit. We do that work. It's a big part of what we do. It's about half of our staff, our property managers and maintenance folks. And guys, I mean, I'll just say there's no other way to say this. In a lot of more progressive circles or conversations that I'm a part of, they're often kind of perceived as the bad guys. They're and you understand it because they're the ones that pull the trigger on evictions, and a lot of them are bad actors. But I think we need to differentiate kind of the good guy property managers from the bad guy property managers, or something that we've tried to call more recently enhanced property management, where we really are kind of intentionally overstaffing at our buildings to create more space to listen to neighbors, to help them make payment plans when they get behind, to help them connect to other resources when they get behind, and to try to do that even with the recognition that sometimes that gets messy, and maybe you're playing favorites, or you're helping me more than you're helping the other guy. Like, that does get messy. It really does. But I think we have to sort of say we want to invest in good property managers who are doing that kind of work to lower eviction rates, to raise housing retention rates. And I don't see a lot of that in sectors like this. I really don't. I don't see any philanthropic organizations and funders saying, how can we invest for better outcomes in your property management? Everyone wants service delivery. And frankly, it's housing retention and lower eviction rates that make the biggest difference. And I just want to continue to say, when you're doing property management in the right way, that is a valuable human service. It's more valuable than a lot of the services that are offered at a lot of different places. And so, again, what happens across the state, I really deeply care about, but I really want us to kind of think differently about how property management done right is part of the solution to lower eviction rates and kind of raise housing retention rates. And I just don't see any conversation about that, and it bums me out.
If I could just piggyback on Joe's comments, and of course I'm going to speak to, I'm going to lead to, again, home ownership, but we haven't yet this morning talked about. Joe mentioned, like they alluded to some of the bad actors. We haven't talked about the percentage of investor-owned, out-of-state investor-owned rental properties here, particularly in Indianapolis. And when I think about the eviction rate and those who are being threatened with eviction or even evicted, and thinking about those out-of-state investors who are coming into our communities and buying properties in some of our most vulnerable neighborhoods, not investing into those properties, but continually raising the rent on those properties, which oftentimes will lead to that eviction. I do think that one, the advocacy around it, being in touch with our local representatives to voice our concerns and our direct experiences related to situations like that. But then also on the other hand, that and this is where I go back to the homeownership piece, that education surrounding the other opportunities that are out there, and showing folks that yes, you are paying this for rent, but your rent is continually increasing, which is putting folks in very desperate situations, and showing them how homeownership also both leads to wealth building and that stability, not to mention the health benefits surrounding it. So reducing that stress, reducing that anxiety. It's also been shown the impact, of course, that stable housing through homeownership has on children and how they're learning in the school systems. So to answer your question, do we see it getting better? Honestly, the work that we're doing here in Indiana, and I'll speak specifically to Intend, we try not to think about how much we're moving the needle, because we honestly don't believe that we'll be able to physically see how much we're moving the needle. But the more work that we do, the more collaborations that we have, the more that we listen to the community, we know that we can always just do our best to get that education out there and to make folks aware of the various opportunities and resources that are available.
I'll just quickly add in to also go along with Stephanie and Joe, and I think that again, like as I alluded to earlier, I think pairing economic and workforce development investments along with housing advocacy and a lot of the other work that Joe and Stephanie mentioned is critical. LISC remains very invested in workforce development programming across the city, and has been for nearly 20 years. And I think, working hand in hand with residents and neighbors as they desire to scale up and to get onto, higher paying career pathways is another strategy, I think, to help soften, what we see happening across, the cost of housing. So, yeah, that's something, yeah. So investments in workforce, and then also investments in entrepreneurship. We're seeing, tremendous, impact stories of folks who are, able to start their own business and, pursue a passion that they've had for many years, and now be able to make, a significant amount of income that they, haven't made in their lives, and to be able to support their families, but also be able to put themselves onto a pathway for wealth building. So, people purchasing cars for the first times in their life, and people being able to move into adequate housing for their family. So those are just a couple of bright spots for us in terms of the next months to the next year of time that we can see impact.
Thank you, Brandon. And LaDonna asked in the chat if you guys would be okay with sharing your contact information. If so, I actually send out a follow-up email where the speakers will be CC'd in there. But in the meantime, if you want to check out the website or anything like that, that's also another resource. But I'll have them CC'd on the follow-up email that I send out as well. I want to allow some more space for any additional questions that we have. Encourage you to come off mute or come on camera and ask, or if you feel more comfortable dropping it in the chat. Looks like Sharon, we appreciate you joining in. Happy you could join us today. But yeah, if we have any other questions, I want to allow some space. I know one of the questions that I had, it may not be completely tied into the topic here, but it was our intro question. I would love to hear from our panelists if you could live anywhere in the world, rent-free, don't have to worry about a mortgage, rent, anything, where you would live. It's kind of like a little bit lighter, but would just love to hear your input.
My heart is for the Caribbean, so I would definitely move to Jamaica. My wife's family is actually from Jamaica, and visited there a couple of times in our marriage, and I just love the island, love the people, love the food, love the weather. So Jamaica would be my destination.
Don't blame me for that one. Yes, I'm there with you. Okay. Stephanie, Joe?
I will say anywhere that's warm and not prone to too much violent weather activity, which I'm not sure where that will be. And so long as my family were with me, particularly my grandbabies. So
Violent weather activity. I love how you phrase it.
Yeah, that's it for me too. It's just like all my friends and all my family are right here in the Englewood neighborhood on the Near East Side. There is no way I'm moving out of the Near East Side, period. But like if all that system kind of could pick up and move anywhere, my daughter did just move to San Diego, 2 blocks from the beach, to start law school. And I love her dearly and I miss her dearly. And we went out to get her settled. And it was my 3rd trip to San Diego, and I came away thinking, why doesn't everyone just move here? Like, it is gorgeous all of the time. You walk out the door, there was like 40 places for coffee, 50 places to get lunch. The beach is right there. It was pretty great. Now, you know what? My daughter is paying for her rent in a little 2-bedroom home that she rents, $4,000. $4,000 for a 700 square foot little nothing.
Yeah.
Pretty wild.
Insanely wild. Yeah, Lindsay said hard pass. I completely agree, Lindsay. Hard pass. That's the thing about California. The weather is beautiful there. I've never been to San Diego, but that's on my bucket list. Would love to go. But the market prices of rent and living, cost of living is just, it's insanely high, unfortunately. But thank you guys for answering. Any other questions that we have related to the topic or not related to the topic, from any of our attendees or listeners today? Well, if not, I just want to say thank you guys again. I think this discussion was very powerful and meaningful. And like I mentioned before, it's just a great way to start the weekend. So I appreciate you all starting.